You know that frustrating feeling when you have all the puzzle pieces sitting right there on the table, but you have literally no idea what the picture on the box is supposed to look like? Well, welcome to The Explainer. Today we're tackling what just might be the ultimate literary and historical mystery in the ancient world, the Song of Songs. Sitting right dead center in the Hebrew Bible, this text has managed to baffle scholars, theologians, and historians for thousands of years. It's this incredibly beautiful, intricate piece of ancient literature, and yet there is absolutely zero consensus on what it actually means.
Okay, let's dive into this. The sheer interpretive chaos of this book is captured perfectly by Saadia, a medieval Jewish commentator. He famously said that the Song of Songs is like a book for which the key has been lost. I love that phrasing. Today, we're going to act as historical detectives. We're going to sort through centuries of academic files to see how generations of brilliant minds have tried, and honestly mostly failed, to forge a key that actually fits this lock.
To help us crack this case, we're relying on a fascinating scholarly survey by Old Testament researcher J. Paul Tanner. In this work, Tanner traces the primary interpretive schemes that scholars have pitched throughout history. We're going to impartially look at the major theories he outlines, contrasting the wildly creative allegorical approaches of the past with the rigorous, literal methods of modern scholarship. But first, why is this book such a massive mystery? Well, Tanner points out a few unique features that basically make it a playground for speculation. For starters, there is a complete absence of specifically religious themes. God isn't even explicitly mentioned. Instead, you get these striking, frankly erotic love lyrics. Add to that the total vagueness of any plot, and yet there's this intricate grammatical structure that strongly suggests a single author or editor put the whole thing together. So it's highly organized, but comes with zero instructions on how to actually read it.
Section 1. The Allegorical Key. Finding spiritual meaning beneath the surface.
So for a huge chunk of history, readers simply couldn't wrap their heads around the idea that plain, earthly human romance belonged in the Bible without some hidden, higher meaning. So they forged the allegorical key. And this brilliantly illustrates how that mindset works. Whenever the text mentioned the bridegroom, Jewish interpreters saw the God of Israel, while Christian commentators saw Jesus. The bride? Oh, well, that was translated into the nation of Israel or the Christian church. Even physical descriptions were completely decoded. For example, the bride's 2 breasts were routinely interpreted as the Old and New Covenants. They literally scrubbed away all the earthly poetry and swapped it out for a spiritual translation.
Now, this wasn't just some fringe late-night theory. This was the dominant view for centuries. We actually have fragments of this approach dating all the way back to Hippolytus, around the year 200. Shortly after that, the scholar Origen became the absolute champion of allegory, writing this massive 10-volume commentary just to turn the text into a spiritual drama free from anything carnal. Fast forward to the 12th century, and you've got Bernard of Clairvaux preaching 86 sermons covering just the first 2 chapters. Clearly, there was a whole lot of spiritualizing going on.
But here is exactly where the allegorical key starts to bend, and eventually break. Without a literal anchor, the interpretation became a total free-for-all. Different groups just brought their own biases straight into the text. In Roman Catholic Mariology, suddenly the bride became Mary. Martin Luther came along and claimed the bride was a symbol of a peaceful state under King Solomon. Johannes Cassius argued the whole book was actually a prophetic timeline of church history. Meanwhile, mystical theology viewed it as the individual soul dissolving into union with God. Basically, everyone found exactly what they wanted to find.
Section 2. Evaluating the evidence. Flaws in the allegorical method.
Despite being insanely popular for centuries, the allegorical method started losing serious ground because, well, it lacked objectivity. There was zero consensus. A shift started happening in academia, and critical scholars began asking a really foundational question. Is there sufficient warrant for departing from a normal hermeneutic, meaning our standard rules for reading? If it walks and talks like ancient love poetry, shouldn't we just read it as ancient love poetry? Allegory kind of forces you to ignore the plain facts of the text to impose this hidden code.
So the crucial point is captured perfectly right here by scholar Dennis F. Kinlaw. He points out that, yes, the Bible definitely uses marriage allegorically sometimes. But when it does, it gives you a heads up. It clearly indicates it. In the Song of Songs, there's absolutely no internal hint that we're supposed to be reading an allegory. Plus, it completely lacks the sort of progressive storyline you'd naturally expect in an allegorical tale.
Section 3. The Typical View. A historical foundation with a spiritual shadow.
As the purely allegorical key got tossed out, scholars tried to forge a compromise. The typical view. Now, typology is a little different from allegory. Allegory basically denies the actual history.
Typology says, okay, yes, this literal historical event with King Solomon really happened, but it was designed to parallel and foreshadow a greater spiritual truth later on. It lets scholars affirm the actual history while still hunting for that higher spiritual shadow. It sounds like a great middle ground, right? But Tanner notes this view still has a pretty glaring flaw. The text itself never once suggests it should be read as a type or shadow.
Section 4. The Drama View. Reading the song as an ancient script.
This massive drive for a truly literal reading pushed 19th century scholars into a fascinating new direction. They figured if it's not a spiritual allegory, maybe it's an ancient theatrical script, something meant to be acted out or sung. A really popular version of this was the three-character shepherd hypothesis. In this dramatic reading, King Solomon is actually the bad guy. He kidnaps this beautiful rustic maiden for his royal harem and tries to seduce her with all this luxury. But she valiantly resists, staying faithful to her true love, a humble shepherd who she finally returns to at the end. It's a classic story of true love conquering temptation.
But again, consensus was practically impossible, even among the literalists. Franz Delitzsch, who is a very renowned scholar, completely rejected the shepherd idea. He pitched a two-character drama where Solomon isn't the villain at all. Instead, he falls for the humble maiden, and her incredible virtue actually purifies his sensual lust, drawing him into this pure, elevated love. So you have two entirely different dramas being pulled from the exact same text.
So why couldn't they agree? Well, because the drama view has a fatal flaw. There are absolutely no stage directions in the text. Zero clear divisions into acts or scenes. Plus, nobody can agree on who is actually speaking to whom in the dialogue. There's also no clear plot that develops into a satisfying dramatic climax. Ultimately, scholars had to admit that the theatrical dramatic form just didn't fit this ancient Semitic poetry.
Section 5. Myth and Dreams. Alternative Literal Frameworks.
Let's move to the 20th century and see how this builds into some of the most radical literary theories yet. With the drama view falling apart, critical scholars started searching the broader ancient Near East for alternative frameworks, and they proposed some truly wild ideas. Some argued the text was adapted from pagan Canaanite fertility rituals celebrating the sun god Tammuz. Another scholar connected the strong themes of love and death to ancient Near Eastern funeral feasts that involve these lavish, wild rituals. And then you have the dream theory, suggesting the whole thing is just a confusing dream sequence, maybe even masking a political plot about reuniting the ancient kingdom.
But Tanner points out a massive, frankly unscalable wall that these fringe theories run right into. After their exile in Babylon, ancient Israel became fiercely anti-idolatry. The idea that super strict Jewish scribes would accidentally admit an explicit, heathen cultic song into their sacred anti-idolatry canon? Yeah, it's incredibly doubtful. So these keys failed to turn the lock too.
Which leaves us at this really fascinating precipice. The allegorical key failed because it completely erased the plain, earthly text to find a hidden code. The dramatic and cultic keys failed because they just didn't fit the literal history. Yet Tanner makes this brilliant point. All these historical failures actually set the stage for one final key, the literal didactic approach. Instead of spiritualizing away the poetry, the literal didactic method embraces the actual text to find a practical, unified teaching, a real historical lesson about the beauty of human love and marriage. So, after centuries of scholars desperately hunting for hidden codes and complex dramas, could it be that the true key to the Song of Songs was hiding in plain sight the entire time? That's a mystery that requires looking at the text with entirely fresh eyes. Thanks for joining us for this explainer, and keep questioning the history behind the pages.